We're back. We are back. Episode 26 is now happening, and I have the pleasure of introducing to everybody, all 46 people that watch this, Mr. Lonny Sweet.
That's a pretty good group, man. 46 isn't bad.
It started at
I
12.
think I get like 12 on mine.
Yeah, it started at 12, so I figured it could only go up from there. Lonny is the CEO of Sweet Management Group, and I have to say we have a mutual thank you that we have to say to our mutual friend Casey Delapenna for the intro. I didn't know Lonny. Lonny is one of those COVID relationships. So we all have them now that we've, run through the gamut and done all this stuff. But Lonny and I happened to meet through our mutual buddy Casey. And when Casey said, you got to meet, you remind me of my buddy Lonny, you got to meet him. It was like, all right, here we go. And right off the bat, I knew that Lonny was my equal or surpassed me in tenacity. And so we were just talking about this prior to jumping on, but this is one of the reasons why this series exists. Lonny and
it's funny, Darren, before you get into that, I can tell you I remember the first time that we actually spoke because I was sitting inside Pat LaFrida's warehouse and I was packing these fucking boxes and I literally had walked out and I still had a hairnet on because when you walk into LaFrida's facility, you got to wear a hairnet. And so it was freezing in there. It was 37 degrees because it's inside, where they're actually packing all the meat. And I came out and I was parked underneath the overhang. And I remember I was sitting in a two hoodies, a winter hat, and a hairnet. By the way, I don't have any hair, obviously. A hairnet underneath my winter hat. And as you were just telling me, I remember it was me, you, and Casey actually on the phone. And I was, it was like one of those moments where, I don't know why the hell I was doing that, but there was nobody else to do it. So it was just me.
It's one of those things that it's like moments in time. So yeah. It's a similar story, but one of the things, again, the series is always about sort of, as I was telling you, it's always about a core tenet. And I think the one thing that, especially after being on hiatus from Homage for about 3 months because of the move out of our office, it's one of those things where tenacity in business or when you're building something, it doesn't matter what it is, tenacity to get from where you are to where you want to be, and all of the landmines that happen from point A to point Z is one of the things that I admire about you most. In that the short time, a year and a half, 2 years, you had to pivot to a company that I'd like to talk about today that, after COVID, you have to make the hard decision of, as I said to you on the post on LinkedIn, it's not a failure. It's a part of the journey. And so to you, I want to open it up to where did it start for you? So I know the story, but for the people that out there that don't, why is Lonny Sweet so tenacious?
Oh God, man, that's a much longer winded question. I think that just comes from childhood, right? I don't know if that can be built. I think it's kind of innately in you. I was a worker my entire life, right? I mean, I remember going from, high school. I would go from high school football practice that ended at 5. I would go from 5 to 10. 5 nights a week working at the pizza place because I like to work, right? I mean, I enjoy the process of working. I enjoy the process of making money. At that time, I liked working in the pizza shop because you got to be around people. But man, I will tell you, we before we got on, we were talking about failure. It's not a dirty word, right? I think that people think about failure as a dirty word. I think they think that sales is a dirty word. It's not a dirty word. It's a growth word, right? For me. I mean, I can tell you I started Sweet Management Group, which was originally Knack Sports and Entertainment, out of failure from a company I was at before. right? So my journey started in sports marketing. I mean, you know this, right? So, I was super lucky to work at a couple really big agencies for the first kind of, 8-9 years of my life. I represented athletes, I represented coaches, I represented broadcasters. I was at SFX, I was at IMG. I met just an amazing amount of people and learned a ton. And then I left IMG in 2007, and went to work for this company called MSL, which ended up being a pretty colossal failure, right? And when that company shut down, I kind of at that moment said, I never really want to work for anybody ever again, because I didn't want somebody else to control my destiny, right? When that company shut down, it was 2008. It was literally right before the world exploded, but I had just had my first kid. I had just bought my first home, and somebody else's actions actually impacted my life. And that I really didn't like that. And so I decided to start my own company at that time. Right. And that was hard, man. It was very, very hard. But then when you lay the groundwork of your career and you lay the groundwork with the relationships, there was a ton of people that stepped up and helped me right away, which was really awesome. And so I started, representing, brands and properties and going out and selling and leveraging my network and all that kind of stuff. And, eventually I met Mark Forgione, where I started representing chefs. And eventually that led to, what's today's Sweet Management Group, where the core 10 of my business is representing chefs, right? So 80% of my business is representing people like Forgione and Ludo Lefebvre and Tiffany Faison and Nina Compton and Rodney Scott and a whole bunch of amazing chefs around the country as their agent and manager, doing all their business deals and looking for restaurant partnerships and doing their TV stuff and books and all that kind of stuff. But, during that time frame, I really like trying new things, right? And so, when the Super Bowl came to New York City, and this is a long-winded answer to your failure question, I try new things all the time because I like it. I enjoy the challenge. My brain just operates that way. I don't overanalyze, which may be a weakness of mine. It may also be a strength of mine. 2005 Super Bowl came around. I decided that, man, I'm in this fucking restaurant business and I know all these chefs and I came from the sports world. Why don't I pop up an 80 by 80 tent directly across the street from Penn Station and bring in 80 chefs and 20 live bands and 20, athletes and create like the ultimate Super Bowl experience. I did that, right? It was called 50-Yard Lounge. It was a colossal failure that almost ended my business. Like literally almost ended my business. Now that I'm past it, it was an amazing growth experience for me, but it was a massive, massive failure, right?
Because that's an interesting dynamic. Because I think a lot of people have a disconnect between or can't get past the failure part of it.
Yeah.
And to me, what's the best way to say this? To me, the experience and the success in that is being able to tie the failure, learn from the failure, but also tie it together and use that as fuel. Similar to you, I'm the same way. Like that's why I've surrounded myself with people who are planners and people who are very detail oriented. Like that's not me. Like I throw the grenade, let's watch the body parts fly, see what happens. Like that's the way I am, similar to you.
Yeah.
Hell, that 50-yard line experience though, like it almost ended your career. I've had similar moments in time where DSM almost ended, but it was like it's how you forge through those experiences and take the epic failures and use that as fuel. Like, how did you marry those two to get it? Like, some people aren't built that way. You say that I'm built that way. I feel the same way.
Yeah, I don't think when you don't have a choice, you don't have a choice, and you just figure it out. I will tell you the one thing I learned from the company I worked at before I started my agency, and there was a bunch of really great salespeople on there. We used to always laugh that say, you could throw me naked in the middle of Times Square with a phone and a phone book, and I would figure out how to make money. And so in that moment, it was kind of like that. There wasn't an option. I had a couple kids, I had a mortgage, I didn't have somebody paying my bills, I didn't have a massive amount of savings. Well, what was my option? Right. And listen, I gave myself a little bit of time to feel really crappy for myself. Right. And it's the same thing with the pandemic, the same exact thing. Like you got to take some time to kind of understand what's going on, like kind of digest it, and then stop crying about it and you move on. Right. And so you figure out a solution, and you just go. right? And so that was kind of what I did. I still had my business and I still had great clients and was still generating revenue. Just kind of had to switch it, figure out how to get out of what I had done, right, or what I hadn't done, and just continue to kind of forge forward. And you look at lessons, you look at how to grow, and you look at the things that you did wrong, and you analyze them. You try to hope that you don't make the same mistakes twice. But I didn't have a choice, dude. Right? There's this really great video that I saw years and years ago that was made by Honda, right? And there was a story about how Honda, the guy who created Honda, he had all these kind of like little nuances and stories that he told. And they used to use it, I think they used to call it like kicking out the ladder. And what that meant was if you go up the rungs of the ladder and you kick out the ladder, there's no place else to go but up. You can't go down, right? And so I always kind of replay that, right? If I'm bold enough to walk up the ladder, right, or climb up the ladder, and I kick it out from underneath me, I don't give myself another option. And so that's the way I look at things like that, right? It was like, my option is going to get a job. That wasn't an option for me. You know what I mean? I didn't want that. And so just kind of move along, right? You try to figure out ways to fight your way out of it.
So how did that impact you? Again, I don't know where I came in through the, within the journey of We Feast, but like how did those lessons impact you when you started like the idea of We Feast? Again, I know it was probably sort of because of the pandemic and like had to change the business model and there were things, but in that idea, you didn't have to do that. There was a lot of risk and a lot of even when we were sort of learning about it as an agency, there was a lot going on there where we were like, wow, there's a lot of challenges to what Lonny is doing here. And this is like, well,
yeah,
and I know some of them just from having conversations when we were working together, but like, that was a lot, man. That was a lot to process during a time when there was a lot of other things happening in the world that you had no control over. So where did that intestinal fortitude come from? Like, how was that birth? And then on the other side of it, from your LinkedIn post, anybody that's watching today, go on Lonny's profile. And another part of you that I sincerely admire is your absolute sincerity to like the cause. When you say that, you look at it and you say, okay, like we had it, we did it, there was a high, ultimately we had to shut it, we had to make some tough decisions, but here's why the sincerity that you have, I kind of like feel the same way about a lot of things. Like the core of Lonny Sweet is like, bro, like you need me to run through a wall, let's go. Like we're doing it.
Yeah.
Like we gotta roll. Like let's do it, homies. So
we Feast and 50-Yard Lounge were drastically different in a lot of ways. Two very different types of failures, right? 50-Yard Lounge was a failure that stopped on its head. I owed people money. I had to figure out how to get it back to them. I thought it was going to be a wild success. There were some great things that came out of it. Jet's House, which lives on today, came from 50-Yard Lounge, right? I helped them create Jet's House. Jet's House was the first part of 50-Yard Lounge. They've done it ever since, right? So there were some really great things that came out of it. We Feast was different. We Feast started as an idea before the pandemic that I had. And, it was basically one of those ideas that I had wrote a deck and it was sitting on my computer for years. And the idea was like, how do you create a tailgate in a box? Simply put, Celebrity Chef created tailgate in a box, right? And when the pandemic hit, it was just kind of those moments where I was like, all right, I don't know what's going to happen with my business, right? My core business ended up actually doing much better during the pandemic because of these virtual events. But at that time, I didn't know. I was like, well, I'm here. Let's try to figure something out. People aren't going to be going out to games. We're going to turn this into a home gating component. People are still going to want to eat. Let me just go try something. And so, from the first time, dude, like you saw me well developed into the business. If you go ask Connor Pratt over Restaurant Mark Forgione, who's the executive chef over at Forge, he still is probably bitter at me because we used to go into there and say, hey, Connor, I need you to go make all this food. And we would sit in the corner of the restaurant that wasn't open, and we would pack it and we try to figure it out. We like destroyed some of the desserts downstairs in their basement fridge because when I put in the containers, it like moved over the cookies. Like it was a disaster, right? Like to get from the first time we did the box to ultimately where we met, where we were actually in a commissary kitchen and we were producing it the right way. We have beautiful packaging. We were really good on the shipping. Like we had figured like that part out. What I didn't figure out was when I met you was actually how to acquire a customer. That was blind knowledge to me. I had no idea anything about performance marketing. So like when Enrico and would talk to me about performance marketing the first couple of times, I was like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. All right. And so that learning was amazing. Now, after we worked together, I flipped my business on We Feast away from being like a celebrity chef curated box that we were shipping out to people because I realized it was way too hard to do and expensive, to doing ingredient kits for virtual events, right? Because we were booking all these virtual events at Connect Group and we were crushing it. And we were hiring somebody else to send out all these boxes. And I was like, whoa, we can do that. And so we flipped our business again in the middle of that pandemic. We partnered with a company called Zinc and we destroyed it. Like it was a 7-figure business in 2021. We did 7,000 boxes we shipped out. But again, I made a decision to get away from the consumer side and go to the corporate side. And then in 2022, when the world started getting better, thank God, those virtual events kind of tailed off and that business went away. So different than 50-Yard Lounge, I paid back my investors, right, which was super important to me because I hate taking people's money. We made some money in 2021. In 2022, it was one of those things where like, I just got to stop the bleeding. This business is not coming back. So when I say it was a failure because it didn't turn into what I originally wanted it to be. But like business-wise, yeah, we had to shut down the business, but I paid my investors back. I made them a little bit of money. I learned a shit ton. It wasn't anything like 50-Yard Lounge because 50-Yard Lounge legitimately almost killed me, right? Where We Feast was, I can chalk it up and I can feel good in my core that we tried absolutely everything that we could to make it work. We gave people jobs during the pandemic. I paid my investors back. We made a little bit of money. And at the end of the day, it just didn't work.
I heard a rumor that before 50-Yard Line, you had hair.
I mean, it was wispy at best. It was wispy at best. I wish my friends would have told me, dude, you just actually got to shave your head. So, Darren, we talk about failure and you got a lot of people that always say like, that's where the learnings come from. And it's interesting when I posted that online on LinkedIn the other day, there was a ton of people that came out and said that, like, get back on the horse, blah, blah, blah. I posted something yesterday about how well Sweet Management Group was doing. The purpose was that I didn't want people to think that I was like, this was just my only job. Right. Like the rest of my business is doing really well. So we were talking about like, how do you get past being, I had people send me notes like, hey, thanks for the honesty. Like that's what this is about, right? Like what I don't like about social media is the bullshit that people put out there. Right. If we're going to use social media, we're going to use LinkedIn, we're going to use Instagram, like tell the whole story and be honest about it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, failure is okay as long as you're learning from it. Right. Sales is not a dirty word. Like, I've got a podcast called Never Sell Lies to Eskimos because I want people to understand like sales is not a dirty word. It's part of what we do for a living. Right. And so
everybody does it. And I don't care. I tell them, I just actually told my daughter this, she's in the 8th grade and she has a presentation coming up. And I said to her, I said, Olivia, it's no different than like you need to get them. Your grade will be based on the fact of persuasion. You're presenting something that in the context of life is probably not going to be like a huge part of your life. But no matter what you do, whether it's my son playing football, whether it's Olivia doing a presentation, or my youngest playing, she just started the violin, which in and of itself is mind-blowing. She plays it like a guitar. I'm like, that's not the way you play it. But I'm like, you guys need to understand that you're always selling something. Like I just had this conversation with one of my team members. They're like, how do you know everybody? Well, because I talk to people. And, my wife will say it. I read a post on LinkedIn. It was actually pretty funny, or maybe it was Instagram. Like, I'll be that dude on a plane that within 10 minutes is eating beef jerky and in like somebody's wedding party. Like, because people interest me. Like, it's
Yeah,
not rocket science.
it's curiosity
It's
for sure.
curiosity.
Yeah,
People interest me. I'm of the mindset, I was always of the mindset that you never, and this is, from my parents, like, you never know who you're going to run into. You never
yeah,
know where that next relationship will come from. You'll never know. Not that it's about like you need something, but you never know what people can bring to the table. And it's sort of that golden rule mentality. Like, treat people how you want to be treated. If
yeah,
and now it's even more compounded as a parent, because I want my kids to see that I'm treating people, or we're treating people, like mom and I are treating people well. And that's a part of being a good human and being a part of the human race. And with that, there may be some failures. There may be some people who you don't see eye to eye with, and that's okay too. Uh,
yeah,
but that understanding, getting and having that, it's like, it's not rocket science to me. Just go and talk to people. Like, there's no like rule book. There's no playbook on like how to drive business. Like,
yeah,
if you talk to people, you do well, and you do well by them, and they trust you. That goes. We've so far outpunched our weight in business from a standpoint of like who we should be working with and how we started this company, as like me sitting at a front porch with like a laptop. Like, you do that by people trusting you. Like, you could do
yeah,
good work. There's good agencies in the world and in the country and in the state of New Jersey that do really good work, but people don't trust them,
yeah,
or they don't, or it's like one or the other. Like, you do good work and people don't trust you, or people trust you but you suck at what you do. And if you can put the two of those things together, like, wow. I mean, I'm assuming that's how the Connect, suite management and the Connect,
yeah,
when it started.
yeah.
Like,
You know, it's funny.
especially, well, Lonnie, especially with like the clientele that Lonnie works with, these are like celebrity. They're really good chefs, but they're big personalities too. So there has to be an element of trust there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you go back to failure. We were just talking about it's oftentimes about just doing the right thing, right? And that sometimes is really hard, right? And having a hard conversation with the people, to being humble about what's happened, about what's going on, and then you build trust over the years. I was talking to a friend of mine, Steve Nudelberg, who's like an expert sales guy, and I had him on our podcast, and he started off by saying sales is dead, right? The way that we know it. This guy is a sales trainer. That's what he does for a living. And what's interesting about that, what's taken me a really long time to kind of get to, like when I was 23, 24, like I'm fucking shoving shit down your throat, sales guy, right? That's not the way that I sell anymore. And the reason is because not everybody always needs what I need, what I have, right? And so it's okay to say, hey, listen, right now is not a great time for what I've got, or I just don't even approach them. It's about relationship building. And that starts with trust, and it starts with doing the right thing. If you owe somebody money, or you fucked up, or you did something wrong, being able to kind of go to them and say, hey, listen, man, this is wildly uncomfortable right now. I screwed up. Let me figure out how to make this right. Right, whether that's doing the right thing, whether it's doing a favor, whether it's paying them back over time. Like, listen, when 50 Yard Lounge hit, I was paying people back for a year. Right, it took me a while. It wasn't, hey, I'm not going to pay you. It was, I need your help right now to try to figure out how I can pay you back over a elongated period of time.
Help me
And
help
that goes a
you.
long way. Yeah, but that goes a long way, right? Being humble goes a long way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like being able to kind of look at yourself and not say, man, well, this guy did it this way, or this happened because of this way, and this is why it happened, and this is why I failed because 10 other people screwed me over. At the end of the day, when you sit in the chair that you sit in, and you sit in the chair that I sit in, it doesn't really matter, right? What the reasons for it, something not working out happens, it ends up on you. Sometimes you got to shoulder that and say, hey, tough conversations coming right now, but we got to have it. And then eventually that becomes where trust is built, right? And if people understand that you've got a certain set of values, those values don't go away, right? Just because, bad stuff happened or whatever it may be. So, again, we started this talking about, We Feast and how I had to shut it down last week. And yeah, it hurts, dude. I mean, don't get me wrong, it hurts. Like there was hundreds of hours of me sitting on my hands and knees in a cooler at Lafreda's or at our test kitchen or figuring out our packaging. It hurts knowing that I put all that time in there and it didn't come to fruition. But I know now I can pack food and send it anywhere around the country. I know a lot more about packaging than I ever did before. I know way more about performance marketing than I ever even thought I could imagine. And I take that stuff and apply it to my business now, right? So it's not a failure in the sense that I learned a ton. It's a failure in the sense that We Feast is no longer around. But you kind of pick yourself up, dust yourself off a little bit and kind of move forward.
It's an emphatic if then statement, right? It's if this doesn't work, then we have all of these arrows in our quiver that we can apply and go forward. What with regards to like the Connect group and how it started,
Yep.
why the change to suite management?
So we were redesigning our website because I hadn't done it in probably 6-7 years. And I just realized there was no brand equity in the Connect group, right? And it started as Connect Sports and Entertainment, and then it evolved the Connect group. And I literally called my clients. I was like, "Hey, Michelle Bernstein, do you even know the name of my company?" And she was like, "Not really." She was like, "I do business because I do business with you." All right. And so it was just a moment for us to kind of not reset, but just kind of, build a new brand, build a new website, kind of change the name, put it out there. I've been doing this obviously for 25 years, and by no means is this company just me at all. But it just felt like the right kind of thing to put out into the world. So it's been great. We've got nice t-shirts and new swag, and I'll send you some. And it's been good. It's interesting to see my name in the name of the company. But it's been fun. We're still doing the same thing, and business, thank God, is better than it's ever been, which is really great.
It's first and foremost, that is the best part of it, because I know
Yeah.
how hard you work when you work on things. So that's awesome. It's something that the reason why I ask is we've always struggled with it. I mean, I wasn't cool enough like to have the cool story that you have, like having your name in something like in the equity that it'll build because it's you. I literally had no creativity when I started this. So I was like, let's just
Yeah.
do initials. And it's evolved into a joke now that it's the Darren and Samantha group, like DSM is not like Sebastian, it's Samantha. But it's always been something that, when we did our like logo update a few years ago, it was like, should we change it? And what is
Yeah.
the equity? And circling back on it, very similar to you, a lot of people were like, it was my network. And they're like, whether you called this the coolest name ever or the most boring company, it's always like DSM. Like I have to be the one that answers. Like similar to what you said,
Yeah.
I'm the last bastion of like, you know, transparency. Like it always comes back to me, the good, the bad, the
Right.
ugly, whatever. And it's
Well, it's your business.
yeah, it's similar to you and that. So we just ended up leaving it. But your story is way cooler than mine. Mine just
It's really not. It's really literally was the three of us redesigning the website, and I kind of said, what if we change the name? That was I mean, really, I just didn't love it. I didn't feel connected to the Connect group, right? Like, and so, again, it didn't have brand equity in the marketplace. People they knew me, they didn't really know the name of the company. So at least there's a connection point here. And that's really it. We brightened up the website and made it look cooler, and it's much more 2022, and not as much like my stupid creativity on a website. Like the people that worked, with me, had a way more say, and we hired somebody to actually do it the right way. So I'm happy with it. I think it looks good. I'm happy with the rebrand. Can I say something, Darren? That I think that one of the things I admire about you, and we were talking about our kid stuff and your daughter playing violin and your son got his going for a three-peat tomorrow. And just thinking about kind of my recent LinkedIn posts, which I'm trying to get much more active about. As business owners, and one of the things I think I've grown up and learned a lot more is like the importance of being able to like breathe and understand why we're all doing this, right? Like when I think back at 50-yard lounge, I was working literally 18-hour days. I was never home, like never home. And I had a really long week this week, and I wasn't home that much either. But I get to take my daughter to another lacrosse tournament this weekend. There's a reason why we all do this, and it's not to to pound our chests and say I worked 70 hours, right? I used to do that when I was younger. The importance of why we do this is getting much more centered in me and my life, right? Like you make money for a purpose, right? And it's for me, is to provide a better life for my kids and give them opportunity, be able to put them in a place that they can make better decisions that aren't like financially stressed, and taking time to spend with them along the way. I think you do a really good job of that, right? You do a really good job of making sure to appreciate kind of the moments and like the purpose of all of this, right? Like, listen, we went and delivered, food a couple of years ago with WeFeast to, a family that was really struggling. And I saw that in you. You did that because it made you feel good, because it was the right thing to do. But it's one of the things I've admired about you, is like being able to kind of step back and say, hey, like I want to do business in New Jersey because I don't want to be traveling around the country, because I want to see my family, right? Which is just something I'm impressed by.
Thank you. I have a very strong village behind me. I'm very thankful to my wife, and as the kids grow up, there's things obviously that we've talked about, like losing my dad at 18. It popped up on my feed, the championship trophy from last year, and it just like it kind of shook me, because we're going through this process now with DSM, with being out of the office, and do we need another office? How do we make sure that work family is in a good place, because they love being together? And when that popped up, and again, my son was a fifth grader last year, so he didn't play a lot. So this year it's like he's starting, and there's this added element of like, today I woke up and it's just an added element of nerves, I guess, that into it. But yeah, losing my dad at 18, and wanting to coach football, even before my son, with my brother-in-law and my buddy Chris, it always played a big role in it. And I was able to see, I think, what the lesson, as hard as it was for me to learn at 18 when I lost my dad. I remember as a kid, he had his own business, and he would have time at the, me and my buddies would play football or basketball up at our elementary school. This is like the mid 80s. And he'd show up with like a box of donuts, or like, munchkins. And I'd be like, what are you doing here? Like no other dad, every other dad worked in the city. And my mom was a second marriage. And I learned from that, like, and I could see it now. I couldn't see it when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I did appreciate it, because I was like, what are you doing here? This is super weird. And now, now I'm able to see that, like in his previous marriage, I have two sisters. He never had a son. And the fact that he could do that and go down and be there. And like my dad, with all my buddies, like they loved him, because he was Sibby. Like he was just Sibby McGarrett. Like he'd always come with donuts. He'd always come, like he was a fun dude. And I never appreciated that. And I'm really hard with Luca. Like Luca, he'll be the first. If you ever meet Luca in person, it'd be like, my dad's a psycho, like on the football field. But I'm trying to learn and strike that balance of, similar to in the post that I put up this morning, similar to with our work family, is trying to find that balance of pushing them hard enough and like making sure they're gaining knowledge and being smarter and understanding what they have in front of them, but also like stopping and smelling the roses. And I think like you and I are built a lot the same way. I'm not built that way. Like my thing is always, what's next? What's next? What's next? What's next?
Me too.
And as you get older, like I'm going to be 46 in February, and you've gone through those failures, and you've gone through those heartaches, and you've gone through, like, I don't know if DSM will be around for the next 20 years. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I don't know. all I know is that the relationships that I have, and this is where like you tie the parallel, the relationships that I have with like my wife and my kids, and that's another thing too. I'm talking in circles here, but you realize that as you get older, the circle becomes smaller, and
Yeah,
the people that you really need to pour yourself into, it becomes smaller and smaller, and it goes against, this is something that I'm learning. It goes against my nature because my nature is to be an extrovert. And so
right.
my wife's an introvert, and she'll be why are you the dude that has to sit on the plane and be in somebody's wedding party in like Cabo in like 15 minutes? Just put a movie on and read a book. I don't know, shut
Yeah,
up. Like do something else. And
right.
so I fight that, but as I'm getting older, I realize that I need to pour myself into the things, into a smaller like circle of life than I did, and
Yeah,
learn
yeah.
to be okay with that. So it's a unique situation. What's next for Sweet Management? Like what Lonnie has some of the coolest stuff, like Rodney Scott, like bro, like that's
Yeah,
it.
it's
When I
amazing.
retire, I'm going to pitmaster school. Like I want to be Rodney Scott.
Yeah.
Like
What's next?
what are you guys doing? Like, what's going on?
So we're leaning into. I'm leaning into. So first off, we've got great clients, right? I think that we need to figure out how to get a few more really great clients, right? That are kind of world class. We're looking at kind of this influencer space, representing culinary talent that's on this influencer kind of track, right? Whether it's on TikTok or Instagram in a slightly different way. Like doing their brand deals is very blocking and tackling. Not that it's easy, but it's shit that we've been doing for the last, or shit I've been doing for the last 20 years. I've got concerns from these influencers about how long their career track can actually be doing that. So like we've got a thought process of how can we take a TikToker who's got 4, 5, 6 million followers and have been creating content and take them offline. How can we help them build restaurants? How can we get them into this food space? How can we bring them to food and wine festivals? How can we elongate their career? So in a year from now, they're not just creating content every week because it's monotonous. And it's at some point, all these people I think are going to burn out. So we're going to lean into that a little bit. And then we're going to just try to do more restaurant deals and more partnerships and bring on better clients and grow and kind of grow what we're doing already. It's been good though, man. Like I said, 2021 was my best year ever. 2022 is like 80% better than 21, and 23 is looking great. So we've got good people. We need to grow our team a little bit as well. Like that's the one thing I've done a really bad job over at 15 years, and we talked about that when we met. Like not growing enough and not leading enough and not being a better teacher is something I personally am focused on because I'm not great at it. So that's what I'm hopefully in 2023 we're going to get better at doing.
Uh, with regards to, it's actually interesting. I don't know if you're a big Hot Ones fan.
I
Uh,
am.
I love it.
He's great.
The last episode was Emma Robinson, I think.
I don't watch them regularly, but
All right, so
I'm a fan of him.
she's like a huge TikToker. Like that's how she
Right.
gets her. Like she's a content creator basically, and it was um it was interesting in hearing that just from the standpoint of like the evolution of her videos and like how like our game changes. Like for me, it's more on the digital side and it moves at like warp speed. Like our team,
Yep.
every time I think we have the marketing stack that we need, it's like, oh well, we need two other things. And I'm like, guys, like, come on, like how much they're like, and I've learned to trust them because it's like it's not my jam. Like
Right.
I just have to shut up and be Mookie Blaylock. I have to facilitate. Like, all right, here's
Right.
you go do it. But the speed at which our worlds in different ways move forward, like the
Yeah. Yeah.
evolutionary process it never stops. And
Yeah.
so
Agreed.
I give you a lot of credit in that these world class talents that you're working with, they're probably very similar to you, very driven, very focused. Like that's how you become the best at your craft. Like, and it's a very serious craft that they do. Um, but that anticipation of having to like keep up with that all the time and like, what's next? What's next? How do we keep going? How do we build? How do we grow? It's sometimes it gets overwhelming.
It
Um,
is overwhelming, but it does go back to what you said about trust and relationships, right? Like, I'm very lucky that I've got really good relationships with my clients, and that's not built overnight,
yeah.
right? And it takes a long time. I consider Forgio my brother, and Michelle Bernstein's been a client for 11 years, and I tell her I love her when I get off the phone because I do, and her husband, right? Like I consider them family,
Well, yeah.
and so it just you know shit doesn't happen overnight,
Yeah.
right? On the content creator side, I'm nervous for a lot of those kids, right? I'm excited when I see Mr. Beast opening up his own burger places and crushing it and thinking about what he's doing offline so he can take his career a long time. But you got a lot of people, you can't, these kids can't create content for 20 years. They can't, right? And so I don't care how much money you make, at some point when you're 27 years old and you create content for 5 years and you're sick of doing it, you're going to burn out. And so if you don't kind of set yourself up for success, you don't figure out other ways to leverage your audience and leverage your reach. And maybe it's not a restaurant, but maybe it's a meal delivery service like a We Feast. Maybe it's, licensing. Maybe it's something else. If you're not thinking about that way, you're kind of fucked. And
Yeah.
so I think what we want to try to do is find those handful of people that are thinking that way and want to leverage what they've built and continue to still do what they're doing, but leverage it so that we can help them, kind of 25 years down the line, like be set up to do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah.
Right. And so that, it's taken us a while to get there. Like I thought we were going to do it a little bit faster in 2022. I thought we were going to pick up a handful more clients. We're kind of getting into that. So 23 kind of is where I'm looking at that.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
Well, this we're I could do this for like 3 hours, but
I know, man.
I won't torture you. Lonnie Sweet, thank you for your time.
Appreciate it, man.
The homage to you, my friend, is you are a beacon of light when it comes to others with regards to tenacity, with regards to um, making something that is like really passionate and powerful. And I have to say thank you, Casey. Thank you for making the introduction, because I I look at what you're doing, and sometimes when I get like down, like there was, like I told you, considering that we were able to get out of our office lease, it wasn't a failure. Like DSM's still rolling and still doing great, but to me, it felt like a failure because we didn't follow through on a goal and a promise that we had made. Uh,
Yeah.
but through circumstances, you get to look at it through a different lens, and so you didn't know you helped me out last month, but you helped me out a lot last month. So thank you,
Yeah,
for
but
what you do. Thank you for what you mean. Thank you for your friendship. Um, last word, man. Go ahead. It's yours.
just appreciate you. Appreciate your friendship as well. I mean, this is this thing we all call life is not easy and it's not a straight line. But I think that's the one thing that I've probably learned more than anything. It is really, they don't teach you in school kind of the challenges that come along. And I don't care if you're a business owner or you work for people. If you worked at Twitter for the last 13 years, your world got fucked last week, period. Right? Good, bad, or indifferent. It just changed. And it scribbles the lines, right? So I do think that at the end of the day, life comes down to relationships, and your circle does get smaller, but these types of conversations, relationships, and friendships, whether we see each other once a year or 15 times a year, they're still awesome. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Um, episode 26 is in the can. Lonnie Sweet, Sweet Management Group. Keep crushing, brother. Thank you.
All right, bud. You too. I'll talk to you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.